Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, Episode 5. Starting out this time with Storrev Devkarin Lich. 1 black green, 4 mana zombie elf wizard, 5/4 with trample. Whenever Storrev Devkarin Lich deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, return target creature or planeswalker card in your graveyard that wasn't put there this combat to owner's hand. So the wording there is a little confusing, and sometimes you got to read it over to understand exactly what's going on. Basically what they're saying is, as long as the thing you're returning didn't go to the graveyard during this combat, the combat in which this ability triggers, then you're okay. So you can get anything else. You just can't get something that, say for example, if you attacked with another creature and that creature died in this combat, you can't get that creature back. So we can get anything else. So that really isn't that limiting at all. And, you know, honestly, people, I think, struggle with this commander a little bit, but I think it's actually pretty easy to build around. For me, I'm probably just doing sort of a graveyard recursion kind of deck. This doesn't have to be a monolith commander where we're relying completely on our commander in order to do stuff. This can just be an assist. We're doing a deck with this style, a graveyard style, and our commander is just assisting us in what we're doing. We don't constantly need to be relying on our commander to be doing stuff. So for me, I'm just making a birthing pod style deck with this. You know, that's how I would make a Storrev deck. Just on my main phase, I sacrifice a creature. It goes to my graveyard. I go get something else out of my library, and then I attack with my Storrev, I connect, and the creature I just sacrificed, I can return it to my hand. Simple as that. Deadly Brew is another one that is going to work really well with this strategy. On our first main phase, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, so we're going to sacrifice something, and if you sacrificed a permanent this way, which we will be sacrificing a creature, you may return another permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can't return the thing that you just sacrificed. So if you have an Eternal Witness in play, it'd be really easy to sacrifice your Eternal Witness, get it back, and then play the Eternal Witness, get the Deadly Brew back, and away you go. In this deck, though, you can do it, because with your Storrev, you can sacrifice your Eternal Witness, get something else back, then I attack with Storrev and get my Eternal Witness back, and then I can do it again. Demogoth Woe Eater is another really fantastic fit in this deck. 4 mana, 7/6. That's pretty great. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Okay, so we'll just sacrifice a creature, whatever, and then get it back with Storrev. Also, though, when you sacrifice Demogoth Woe Eater, each opponent discards a card, you draw a card, and you gain 2 life. So what we can do if we want is we sacrifice Demogoth Woe Eater to its own ability, right? Because you have to sacrifice a creature at the beginning of the upkeep. We sacrifice it to its own ability. Each opponent discards a card, we draw a card, and we gain 2 life. That's all really good. And then we attack with our Storrev, pick it back up, and play it again on our second main phase. So basically every turn we're 4 mana, making all of our opponents discard a card, and we get to draw a card and gain 2 life. That seems pretty good, right? And then on top of it, because you're playing it on your second main phase, you have a giant 7/6 blocker. Eldritch Evolution is another thing that we can do with this. Same sort of idea where we sacrifice a creature and then maybe we can get it back with Storrev. Rushed Rebirth is another card recently printed that will fit perfectly in this deck. And then of course we can just chuck creatures into our graveyard, right? Any creature that's in our graveyard that wasn't put there this combat, we can put it back to our hands. So Entomb or Unmarked Grave work perfectly. We just go get something out of our deck, throw it into our graveyard, and then we can immediately return it to our hand. Any utility card, Eternal Witness, or maybe a Reclamation Sage or something that we need to solve a problem, we chuck it in our graveyard, we attack with our Storrev, we connect, and then we pull it out of our graveyard and play it. Auric Loremage, of course, is fantastic for this. Go get something out of our library, chuck it in our graveyard, and then we can get it back. Hell's Caretaker is just fantastic here. And again, this to me is the deck. Storrev is just sort of an assist here. Cards like Hell's Caretaker and Auric Loremage and Birthing Pod, all 3 of these cards works really fantastically in tandem, where I can go get a creature out of my library with Auric Loremage, chuck it in my graveyard. Hell's Caretaker will sacrifice a creature I have in play and then return that creature I just chucked constructed my graveyard to the battlefield. This is only during your upkeep. That's going to work with Storrev's ability, so we can then get that creature back with Storrev if we want to. We can also sacrifice a creature with Birthing Pod, send it to the graveyard, get it back with Hell's Caretaker. You know, sort of around and around we go. In our graveyard, in our library, in our hand, all these creatures just keep cycling through and through, and we can just get into all sorts of shenanigans. If you're making a Storrev deck, though, you always want to make sure you have creatures that are sacrificing, like Scourge Tribe Elder and Garza's Assassin is another personal favorite of mine. We want creatures that you can just immediately sack and chuck them in your graveyard, because you don't want to waste that ability, right? You always want to make sure there's something in your graveyard that you can immediately return to your hand if you need to. So we can just sacrifice a Scourge Tribe Elder, then we'll attack with Storrev, we'll get it back. We don't want to lose that value. Garza's Assassin is a personal favorite of mine. Black, Human Assassin 2/2. Just sacrifice it to destroy target non-black creature. Pretty fantastic. It has that recover ability, which isn't fantastic because you have to pay half your life rounded up to get it back out of your graveyard when another creature dies. And if you don't, it gets exiled. However, in this deck, we can get it back out of the graveyard right away, so we don't have to worry about it getting exiled. We can sacrifice it, destroy one of our opponent's non-black creatures, attack with Storrev, get it right back so it's not sitting in the graveyard. Also, let's not forget, our commander is a zombie, elf, wizard, right? You always got to be looking at those creature types whenever you're building an underwhelming commander. And zombie and elf are pretty fantastic. Wizard obviously is another really popular creature type, but in black and green, not so much. But zombie and elf in black and green is fantastic. Zombie Master and Damri, Lord of Leaves are two. I mean, you really could go pretty crazy with this, obviously, if you wanted to. These two I picked, though, because Zombie Master is going to give our commander Swamp Walk, and Damri is going to give him Forest Walk. So those are both pretty fantastic, right? We want to be connecting. We really don't care who we attack, right? We just have to hit somebody so we can get that trigger. Also, Damri gives Shroud, which is great, and Zombie Master allows us to regenerate our commander so we can keep it from getting removed. And don't forget, you can also use Planeswalkers. You could just make a Super Friends deck with this commander, really. That's not my specialty, but if I was to go that route, I honestly think the creature route is the best way to go here, but you could chuck a couple Planeswalkers in here, and if you were to do that, again, you could go get a Planeswalker with your Entomb or your Auric Lore Mage, right? This is why Auric Lore Mage is so fantastic. It gets any card out of your library. So you can go get a Planeswalker with it, chuck it in your graveyard, and then get it back with Storrev. I think what I would do if I was going to go the Planeswalker route is I would go cheaper Planeswalkers, like say Liliana of the Last Hope or Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. Those are both great ones. They're cheap, so we can minus them a lot, right? And then they'll go to the graveyard, and then we can get them right back with Storrev, play them again. I think Lily's second ability there, put the top two cards of your library into your graveyard, then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously, that synergy works with the deck really well. So I think you could definitely go a Planeswalker theme where I play a Planeswalker, I minus it right away. Maybe it dies, but then I can get it right back with my Storrev, also works. Next up at number 2 this week is Kiku Knight's Flower. Black, Human Assassin 1/1. Has a very unique ability of pay 2 black, and tap target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. Pretty interesting build around. I mean, you're killing your opponent's creatures. For the most part, that's what you're doing, which is always going to be good. Really, you could almost just make a black good stuff deck with this, and you have a commander that's going to be killing your opponent's creatures. Most creatures, I think, are going to be hit by this. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be a very high percentage of creatures in Magic have a power and toughness that's the same. So those creatures will die to her ability. Obviously, the creatures with a greater power than their toughness will also die. It's just the creatures that have a smaller power than their toughness that we're not going to be able to hit with this. But I would say, I mean, it's got to be like 80% of the creatures that we should be okay with. She also is a human assassin, so maybe you could go an assassin route with this. You know, I did look on EDH Rec and see what people were doing there, and it seemed to me like it was mostly assassin tribal. There's not a ton of really good support for that. However, if you did go that route, you would need to put Scarblade Elite in the deck. Black, 2/2. Elf Assassin, and you tap and exile an assassin card from your graveyard, destroy target creature. So I would put this card in the deck, okay? And the reason why I put this card in the deck is because our commander is an assassin. So you can just have this card, and you could have a few other assassins in here maybe, but what you could do with this is if our commander is going to die anyway, we just let it go to the graveyard. Rather than just sending it to the command zone, we let it go to the graveyard, then we can use Scarblade Elite's ability, exile it from the graveyard, and then return to the command zone, right? So we're not not losing anything here. We just get to destroy another creature on top of it. So I think that works. Also, of course, we have to put Kiku's Shadow in here. Black sorcery. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. I think that's kind of a flavor fail if you don't. The ability is a little mana intensive, right? 4 mana and tap. That's kind of a lot of a mana. So we got to put Thran Turbine in here. Heartstone, I think, also works good. Thran Turbine, like I said in my 10 cards video where I talked about this, any commander where you have an activated ability that has that colorless mana, it's perfect for. At the beginning of your upkeep, you just add 2 colorless mana. You can't spend that mana to cast spells, so basically it's going to be used for activated abilities, right? That's really all you're going to use it for. So our commander's ability becomes black. Heartstone's just going to reduce it by 1. It reduces all activated creature abilities by 1, our opponent's 2, so that's why I don't love it, but paying 3 mana is a little bit better than paying 4, I think. Also, Illusionist Bracers and Rings of Brighthearth are going to help here as well. Illusionist Bracers, once we get it on there, we're just going to be able to pay 4 and kill 2 creatures. Rings of Brighthearth, we can essentially pay 6 total, right? So we pay the 4 for that activated ability, and then we can pay another 2 and kill another creature if we want to. Kiku has a tap ability, so we got to throw 1,000-Year Elixir in here. I had a guy comment on my videos that perhaps I have a hoard of 1,000-Year Elixirs at home, and you know, I'm trying to drive the price up or something by including it in all my decks. But really, in any deck where you have a tap ability, you should be putting 1,000-Year Elixir in here. You can use your commander right away, and also you can untap it and use it again. It's not as good because Kiku has that very expensive activated ability. It's not as good as it would be in most decks, because if we want to play it right away, it's 2 mana plus another 4, so that's 6 mana total, not including commander tax if she's died before, and even untapping it and using it again, that's 4 mana, then 1 to untap, and then 4 more mana. That's 9 mana total to use her twice. So even though I still would put it in the deck, I don't think you'll be using it a ton. Gotta make sure we can target those creatures. So Arcane Lighthouse and Shadow Spear. Arcane Lighthouse I throw in almost all my decks anyway, but until end of turn, creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud, and can't have Hexproof or Shroud. That's really important in a deck where your commander is targeting your opponent's creatures all the time. And obviously, indestructible creatures are going to be perfectly fine, so I think Shadow Spear's a great fit here too, where we can lose Hexproof and Indestructible on our opponent's stuff until end of turn. You know, I was trying to think, how do we use this? Like, what do you do here? People are looking to me to give them ideas of what to do with Kiku, and I was trying to think of something other than just I'm killing my opponent's creatures. What else can I fit in this deck? I mean, obviously you're going to be killing your opponent's creatures. That's the main theme of this deck, but a couple interesting ideas I came up with. So Gilt-Leaf Winnower, a very unique and weird card, just got a reprint in Commander Legends. 3 black elf warrior, 4/3 with menace. When Gilt-Leaf Winnower enters the battlefield, you may destroy target non-elf creature whose power and toughness aren't equal. Very bizarre card. I don't think there's any other card like this. I think it's a good fit in the deck, because if our opponent has that creature that our Kiku doesn't hit, if opponent has a Tree of Perdition out, Kiku's going to do nothing to that, right? Or any, maybe you're playing against an Arcades deck and there's a whole bunch of those. Gilt-Leaf Winnower will kill any of those creatures if their power and toughness isn't the same. So basically it's getting those creatures that our commander can't. Another way we can do it is by giving our opponent's creatures Death Touch, Alchemist Gift, and Retreat to Hagra. I mean, we can use these on ourselves, sure, but we can also use them on our opponent's creatures. Alchemist's Gift is a 1 mana instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains your choice of Death Touch or Lifelink until end of turn. I think this one's particularly good because we can use it on opponent's creature, right? So again, our opponent has a Tree of Perdition. We cast this on it. It becomes a 1/14 with Death Touch. It's going to deal 1 damage to itself, and because it has Death Touch, it's going to die to that. Retreat to Hagra, I like this one because you're just not paying any mana, right? It's just play a land. My opponent has a creature with a bigger toughness than it has power, and we can give it +1/+0 and Death Touch until end of turn, and then Kiku can kill it. And then, you know, we're really just going to play a whole bunch of there's creatures dying all over the place, sort of tribal, all those favorites like Black Market, Grave Betrayal, both cards that used to get played in the format a lot. I don't see them much anymore. Black Market's just going to give us lots of free black mana. Grave Betrayal's fantastic. 7 mana enchantment, if you haven't seen it before, whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. The creature's a zombie in addition to its other types. So we can just kill an opponent's opponent's creature, and then we get it at the end step. Harvester of Souls and Massacre Worm, again, just great cards. I probably would put in almost any mono black deck. Harvester of Souls is going to net us a draw every time we kill an opponent's creature or one of our creatures die. Massacre Worm's going to have our opponents lose 2 life. And then any Morbid effect is going to work great here too. Reaper from the Abyss or Skursdag High Priest. I like these ones because they don't cost mana. Our commander's a little mana intensive, so we want some Morbid effects that aren't going to actually cost us anything. Reaper from the Abyss at the beginning of each end step. If a creature died this turn, we get to destroy another non-demon creature. So that's fantastic. Skursdag High Priest, we can just make 5/5 demon tokens. I think that's pretty good. Sangromancer and Kalitas are going to be good fits in this deck. Sangromancer is going to net us 3 life every time an opponent's creature dies. Also happens to net us 3 life when an opponent discards a card, which can also be great. Sangromancer is really one of those cards that can just go in just about any deck and be good. Kalitas, you know, you really have to be careful. Sometimes your opponent's going to have a Marin deck and they're not going to care if you're killing their creatures. So we got to have effects like this where if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it. And then on top of that, we get the 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield, which is going to be helpful. And then a couple interesting additions to the deck. I thought Grim Return was good. 2 and a black instant, choose target creature card in a graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control so we can just, again, pick a creature that we want of our opponents, kill it, and then pay 3 and get it into play under our control. Toshiro Umezawa, 1 black, Human Samurai 2/2 with Bushido 1. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard. Really great ability. It really is. You know, we're not building around this ability, but guaranteed we're going to have a few instants in our graveyard at some point in the game, and we can just cast them. It's just going to give us flashback, essentially. And then since we're stuffing mono black legendary creatures from Kamigawa in this deck, Kukushu the Evening Star I think is a great fit as well, because we can also kill our own creatures with this ability, right? We can, if we want to, aim Kiku's ability at our own creature like our Kokusho, and it'll go to the graveyard and we'll get that dice trigger, which is pretty fantastic. It's just a great card anyway. Again, another card you could probably just put in any deck. So you could go the route of, I'm going to put a bunch of creatures in here that I want to die, because then I can kill them with my Kiku. But that is it for Kiku, and the winner this time, just by a hair, is Arasta of the Endless Web. 2 green, 3/5 with reach, legendary enchantment creature spider. So it is a spider, and it's very important to also note that it is an enchantment creature, okay? That's definitely significant. And whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. You know, the obvious build here is Spider Tribal, right? Unfortunately, in mono green, there really isn't a lot of Spider Tribal support. And really, there isn't any Spider Tribal support at all. There's a few cards, not really hardly any in mono green. And also that ability, whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, you have no control over that, right? So you can't really build around that either. All you can do is sit back and hope your opponents are casting instant sorcery spells, which of course they're going to be. I would imagine if you go around the table once, your opponents are probably going to cast at least 2 on average, 1 instant and 1 sorcery maybe. So you're going to get 2 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach every turn. Maybe that, I mean, that's just a guess. So how do you build this deck? You can't really build a spider tribal theme. You just have to basically assume you're going to be getting those 1/2 tokens all the time. There is a little bit of spider stuff that I threw in here. Arachnogenesis, why not? It is a good card anyway. 2 and a green instant, put X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Prevent all combat damage that would be able this turn by non-spider creatures. This is just a good card anyway. Again, you could just throw this in any deck. I think it would be good. It's going to fog if you're getting attacked, and then you get a bunch of spider tokens on top of it. Also prevents damage to spider creatures. Arachnus Spinner and Arachnus Web is sort of really the only actual spider tribal card that fits in this deck. I also think it's pretty good. Arachnus Spinner, 5 and a green, 5/7 with reach. Tap an untapped spider you control. Search your graveyard and or library for a card named Arachnus Web and put it onto the battlefield attached to target creature. That's pretty good, right? Because Arachnus Web is a 2 and a green enchanted creature can't attack or block and its abilities can't be activated. You know, that's really good in a green deck because green decks can sometimes have issues dealing with creatures. However, at the beginning of your end step, if enchanted creature has power 4 or greater, destroy Arachnis Web. Well, I mean, that's no issue, right? At the beginning of the end step, okay, no problem. We'll just tap another spider we have and get it back out of our graveyard because Arachnis Spinner allows us to search our graveyard for it. So we can just keep getting it back. Every end step, if it falls off that giant creature that we have it on, we'll just tap another spider token, go get it out of our graveyard and put it back on. Sweet Gum Recluse is another card. It's a spider, but I also think it actually works in the deck. 4 green, flash, cascade, reach, 0/3. When Sweet Gum Recluse enters the battlefield, put 3+1/+1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that entered the battlefield this turn. So the idea here is you cast this with flash. It has cascade. Hopefully you hit another creature with the cascade, and then you get to put 3+1/+1 counters on Sweet Gum Recluse, which makes it a 3/6, and then also whatever other creature you just happen to cascade into. But in this deck, we can wait until we get a couple of those spider tokens. So let's say we have an opponent, the opponent maybe right before us that's playing, and they cast 2 instants and sorceries. Now we're going to get 2 1/2 green spider creature tokens. Then on that end step, we're going to cast our Sweet Gum Recluse, right? We're going to wait for the right moment for this, and it's going to put 3+1/+1 counters on itself again, and also those 2 tokens that came into play, right? This includes tokens. And we got to have Swarm Yard. Like I said, if you have a commander that is a insect, rat, spider, or squirrel, this has got to be in your deck. This is going to regenerate our commander. It's going to regenerate the other few spiders we have in our deck, but most importantly, it's going to regenerate our commander, which is really important because it's an enchantment. It's going to be easy to kill. It's going to die to enchantment and creature removal. So our opponent casts a Bane of Progress. That's going to kill our commander, but we can use the Swarm Yard to regenerate it. So that's really, really important in the deck. Gotta have those token doublers, Parallel Lives, and Second Harvest. I mean, you just gotta. I know these cards are getting expensive, especially Parallel Lives. It's like a $60 card. You could put Doubling Season in here as well. I didn't. You know, I already had quite a few expensive cards in this deck, and I didn't want to go too crazy. Also, some other token effects. Awakening Zone, I think, works great. Avenger of Zendikar, of course. These are just good cards that, since we're doing sort of a token theme anyway, why not throw them in there? Michaeloth and Sandward Convergence, again, just good cards that work in a token theme. Michaeloth particularly has that Devour too, so now we can just use those spider tokens for other things. We're going to be making these spider tokens. We got to use them. We can't just have a bunch of 1/2 spiders. That's not fantastic. Michaeloth can devour, say, 2 of them, and now it becomes an 8/8 that's going to make us 4 Saproling tokens every turn. That's pretty fantastic. Let's try pumping up those spiders. Orin Reef, the Vastwood, and Renata Called to the Hunt. Orin Reef, we can tap it to put +1/+1 counter on each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. Typically, I think we want to wait. We want to hold this up if we can and wait for the right moment to use this. Renata is just going to put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature we control that enters the battlefield. Just going to enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. So all of our spiders are now going to be 2/3s. Beru, Fist of Krosa, and Kesa, right? These are ways we can pump up our team. Beru really could probably go in a lot of decks. 3 green, human druid 4/4. Whenever a forest enters the battlefield, green creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample end of turn. The interesting thing about this card is it's whenever a forest enters the battlefield, period. That means when your opponents play forest, green creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample end of turn. So typically on our turn, we're going to play a forest. Hey, maybe we got a Sky Shroud claim and we can play a couple of forests, so we can pump our team quite a bit. Our spiders will now be 3/4s with trample. That's pretty good. But even on our opponent's turn, right? If our opponent plays a forest, our whole team is going to get pumped by +1/+1. It's going to make them better blockers, so that's not bad. Also has that Grandeur ability, discard another card named Beru, Fist of Krosa, which of course is not fantastic in Commander, but I will revisit that one. Shamanic Revelation, of course, is going to let us draw a card for each creature we control. I also think Symbiotic Deployment. This is a good deck for this card. Talked about it in my 10 cards video, 2 and a green enchantment. Skip your draw step. That's not great, but we can pay 1 and tap 2 untap creatures we control to draw a card. Again, this is the kind of deck you want to play a card like this in, right? Because we have a commander that makes creatures, so we never have to worry about getting locked out. And once we get a bunch of spiders, we can really go to town with this. Orin Frostfang and Toski Bearer of Secrets are also going to be fantastic. Whenever our creatures are dealing combat damage to a player, we can draw a card. We can really just chuck our spiders at our opponents, wherever we see fit. If we happen to lose them, okay, whatever. No big loss, right? We're just going to get some more. You really have to go this route when you are drawing with a deck like this. This is more of a go wide strategy. We want to be using those spider tokens, though, to our advantage, like Culling Dais and Evolutionary Leap. We can sacrifice them now to get more advantage out of them. Culling Dais, one of my personal favorites. Just sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on it, and then you can pay 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card for each charge counter on it. So we can just every turn be sacrificing a spider. I think I probably would do that with this. Again, those spiders aren't going to be super fantastic. They're just a 1/2. So we want to be using them with other effects like Evolutionary Leap. We'll sacrifice them to go get another creature out of our deck. However, if we get a bunch of them, we can start tapping them to certain effects like Null Mage Shepherd, 3 and a green, Elf Shaman, 2/4. Tap 4 untapped creatures you control to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So Null Mage Shepherd can include itself. So if we have Null Mage Shepherd and say our commander in play, all we need is 2 of those spider tokens, and now we can start tapping all of them to destroy an artifact or enchantment every single turn. I think that works. And Obelisk of Erd, 6 mana artifact, used to be kind of a commander staple. I don't see it much anymore. It has Convoke, which also works good in our deck because, again, we can tap those little spiders to help cast it. And when it enters the battlefield, we'll choose a creature type, obviously spider, and then our spiders are going to get +2/+2. So all those little spider tokens are going to be 3/4s, pretty darn good. Our commander is going to be a 5/7. And Eldrazi Monument, it really is fantastic in any deck where you're creating lots of little tokens. 5 mana artifact creatures you control get +1/+1 and have flying and indestructible. So that is amazing, especially, again, because our commander is an enchantment and a creature and dies really easy. Giving it indestructible is going to be great. At the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice a creature, of course. If you can't, you have to sacrifice Eldrazi Monument. That won't be a problem. I really don't think there's ever going to be a situation where it's going to go around the table an entire turn and one opponent doesn't cast an instant or sorcery. I seriously doubt that's going to happen. Even if it does, we still won't be in big trouble because we probably already have a few creatures in play. And I threw Liquid Metal Torque and Void Mirror in this deck because I thought they were good fits. I thought Liquid Metal Torque was an absolute perfect fit in any mono green deck because we can turn our opponent's creatures into artifacts, and then of course green removes artifacts so easily. Just a really fantastic card for commander. And Void Mirror also, I think, is a good fit in the deck. 2 really fantastic cards from my top 20 Modern Horizons list. And of course, we got to close out the game. So how are we going to do that? Beastmaster Ascension and Essence of the Wild are great ways to do it. Beastmaster Ascension, of course, I'm sure everyone has seen that one before. It's going to eventually get our entire team +5/+5. So now those spiders are going to be 6/7s. And Essence of the Wild is an interesting one. 3 green, avatar, 6/6. Creatures you control enter the battlefield as a copy of Essence of the Wild. So what we can do is we don't want to throw this out right away, right? If we have this in play and we play our commander will come in as a copy of this. We don't want to do that. We want to have our commander in play. We want to sort of be established. Then we put this guy down, and now every single time we make a 1/2 spider token, it's actually going to be a copy of this, right? It's going to be a 6/6 essentially, which is the important part. So now all of our 1/2 tokens are going to be 6/6s. So that's going to close out the game pretty quick. So that is Arasta of the Endless Web, and I have the deck list in the description below. And of course, I also have the poll for the next Underwhelming Commanders video in the description as well. So feel free to go there and vote on the commanders that you want to see in the next video. Also in the description below, I have my Patreon. If you want to click on the link, I have lots of other content on my Patreon for all my patrons. If you want to support the channel, but also if you just can't get enough of me, I have a lot more stuff on my Patreon for you to enjoy. So check it out. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.